In 1976, a 23-year-old woman named Anneliese Michel died after undergoing 67 exorcisms. Priests said she was possessed by demons. Medical experts said she suffered from epilepsy and mental illness. Audio recordings were captured of her screaming during the rituals. Recordings that were later played in a German courtroom where her parents and two priests were charged with negligent homicide. Was this a case of demonic possession or a tragic failure of medical care? Tonight we're examining the facts, the medical records, the church's role, the trial, as well as the recordings that still disturb listeners decades later. Because this case doesn't just ask what possessed her, it asks something far more unsettling. Did belief kill her? Anneliese Michel was born on September 21, 1952, in the small Bavarian town of Liebelfing, West Germany, to a deeply Catholic family. From an early age, she was described as a shy, pious, and obedient girl, deeply immersed in her faith. Her family had strong religious convictions, which would later play a significant role in the decisions they made when she fell ill. By all accounts, Anneliese's childhood was quiet and ordinary, though she was known for being introspective and intensely spiritual, often contemplating matters of sin and the afterlife, traits that would later make her struggles all the more complex. Her troubles began in earnest at the age of 16, when she suffered her first grand mal seizure at school. She was immediately taken to a hospital, and doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition that can trigger seizures, hallucinations, intense emotional episodes, and personality changes. She was also diagnosed with depression, which compounded the difficulties she faced. Over the next few years, she underwent multiple hospitalizations and was prescribed a variety of medications, including antipsychotics and anti-seizure drugs like Tegretol. Yet her condition showed little improvement. While some treatments helped reduce the frequency of her seizures, Anneliese continued to experience hallucinations, mood swings, and extreme emotional distress. By her late teens, she began to report strange phenomena that deeply unsettled her family. She claimed to hear voices, sometimes whispering threats, other times condemning her to hell. She described seeing shadows and faces no one else could see, sometimes terrifying and grotesque. Her behavior grew increasingly erratic. She isolated herself from friends, refused social engagements, and became hyper-focused on religious matters. According to family members, she developed a fear of sacramental objects. Crucifixes, holy water, and statues of saints caused her visible distress, leading to violent reactions at times. She started refusing food, withdrawing into herself, and expressing guilt over imagined sins. Doctors continued to treat her medically, but Anneliese and her family grew convinced that her suffering was spiritual rather than physical, a belief that would soon escalate into one of the most infamous exorcism cases of the 20th century. By 1975, after years of medical treatment that offered little relief, the Michel family sought help from the Catholic Church, believing Anneliese was possessed by demonic forces. At first, the church hesitated, insisting that she undergo further psychiatric treatment. But eventually, Bishop Joseph Strangl granted permission for exorcisms under the Rituale Romanum, the official Catholic rite for expelling demons. Two priests, Father Ernst Alt and Father Arnold Renz were appointed to perform the rituals, and the exorcisms began in September of 1975. Over the next 10 months, the priests conducted 67 exorcism sessions, often lasting 4 hours or more, in the Michel family home. Some accounts indicate that sessions occurred up to twice a week, and the priests even slept in the house to maintain vigilance over Anneliese's condition. Eyewitnesses described the exorcisms as intense, frightening, and physically demanding for Anneliese. She reportedly spoke in guttural voices, sometimes growling or screaming, and would switch between voices, claiming that multiple demons inhabited her. Among the names she allegedly gave for these entities were Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Nero, Adolf Hitler, and an evil priest named Fleischmann, whom she claimed had appeared to her in visions. During sessions, she screamed, cursed, begged for mercy, and pleaded for the demons to leave her body. Her parents and priests reportedly restrained her at times, fearing she might harm herself or others. On audio recordings made during the exorcisms, which later became critical evidence in the trial, the priests are heard commanding the spirits to leave in the name of God, while Anneliese cries out in pain, fear, and despair.
Meine Feinde, ich hasse sie. Die Menschen müssen mir zu den Beten, weil. Ja, weil die Übermacht der Hölle so groß ist.
Witnesses described her body as convulsing violently, yet displaying unusual strength despite severe malnutrition. Anneliese's physical health deteriorated rapidly during this period. She refused regular meals, drank minimal water, and became emaciated. By the end, she weighed only about 68 pounds. Her knees were injured from constant kneeling and prayer postures, and she suffered infections and exhaustion. Despite these clear signs of medical emergency, the focus remained on spiritual intervention. Family members and the priests believed that her suffering had a purpose, that enduring the exorcism would help cleanse her soul. Neighbors and visitors reported that the house was tense and unsettling, with Anneliese often shouting and sobbing during and between sessions. One priest later described moments when she appeared to speak in languages she had never learned, or when she addressed the demons as though they were tangible, malevolent beings standing in the room with her. Tragically, on July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel died at home. The autopsy revealed that her death was caused by malnutrition and dehydration, exacerbated by prolonged neglect of her physical needs. Her death shocked Germany and the world, raising urgent questions about the boundary between spiritual belief and medical responsibility. In 1978, Anneliese's parents, Joseph and Anna Michel, and the two priests, Alt and Renz, were charged with negligent homicide. The trial became a focal point for debates about faith, medicine, and legal accountability. Doctors testified that Anneliese's behavior could be fully explained by epilepsy, psychosis, and severe depression, and that her death was preventable if proper medical care had been maintained. The defense argued that the family had acted in good faith, guided by religious convictions, and that the exorcisms were legally and morally justified. During the trial, audio recordings of the exorcisms were played, capturing Anneliese's distress, the priest's commands, and the purported voices of demons, shocking the courtroom. Witnesses testified about her erratic behavior, extreme fear of religious objects, and episodes of physical and emotional torment, emphasizing the intensity of her suffering. Ultimately, all four defendants were found guilty of negligent homicide, receiving 6-month prison sentences later suspended and converted to probation, recognizing both the sincere intentions of the family and the tragic consequences of their actions. The story of Anneliese Michel continues to captivate and disturb because it exists at the intersection of faith, medicine, and the law. It raises profound questions about mental illness, religious devotion, and personal responsibility. For some, she remains a tragic figure, a young woman whose suffering was misunderstood and mishandled. For others, she's a cautionary tale about the dangers of exorcism and extreme religious belief. Her story inspired films like The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Requiem, and her gravesite in Klingenberg am Main has become a place of pilgrimage for devout Catholics. Beyond the sensational aspects of alleged possession, the case challenges us to consider how society interprets suffering, mental health, and spiritual belief, and how tragically fragile the human mind and body can be when caught between forces both seen and unseen. Even decades later, the Anneliese Michel case remains a touchstone in discussions of exorcism, mental health, and legal responsibility. The tapes of her exorcisms are preserved in archives, studied both by skeptics and believers, and her story is frequently cited in textbooks on psychiatry, law, and religious studies. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How do we discern genuine spiritual phenomena from psychological illness? How far should belief guide action when lives are at stake? And most haunting of all, how could a young woman endure such suffering while those around her believed they were saving her soul? These questions, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable, ensure that Anneliese Michel's tragic story continues to resonate, educate, and chill the imagination decades after her death. The death of Anneliese Michel remains one of the most disturbing intersections between faith, medicine, and the law. The court ruled negligent homicide. The church defended its actions, but the tapes of her exorcism still exist, and so do many questions. Where is the line between faith and responsibility? When does devotion become dangerous? And how do we protect the vulnerable when belief overrides evidence? Her story later inspired the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose, but the real case is far more tragic. If this case makes you question where you stand on possession, mental illness, or the power of belief, do you believe this was an actual possession? Or maybe just a preventable tragedy? If you enjoy deep dives into paranormal cases, subscribe here for more true stories of hauntings, the supernatural, and unexplained phenomena. And in the meantime, remember, stay spooky.